Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks, as always, for making your way here and checking out the series. You know what to do. If you like what you see, what you hear, hit that subscribe button. I put out 3 new interviews every single week. So it's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. And I'm so excited today to be talking with Dan Smith from Bastille. Hello.
Hey man, how you doing?
Doing great. Congratulations on this excellent new album, Give Me the Future. What an adventurous and fun and interesting concept this is.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I'm very excited for it to be out. It's, I guess, if it was a film, it would be a science fiction. We wanted to make an album that was all about escapism and our relationship with technology and how it's affecting our sense of self and our relationships with each other. And yeah, it was just a really fun way to deep dive into sci-fi as a genre, which is not like my favorite genre, but there are so many amazing, obviously, like books and films and comics and representations of different versions of the future out there in pop culture. So it was nice to kind of deep dive into that and also just live in the times that we live in, where we've kind of surpassed so much of the sci-fi of our childhoods and of the past. And yeah, we're all kind of like living through the consequences of the internet spilling out into the real world. So, just a really fun, happy way to write a pop record is what I thought. I thought like, let's make our lives really easy and try and do a very nuanced, complex pop, retro futuristic sci-fi album, taking in all of those themes. So you're welcome.
And yet it's fun. Somehow it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it is fun, but you just laid out like the entire thing right here. I don't know. It's sort of an opera. It's sort of a rock opera, pop rock opera, whatever. Was it realized beforehand? Was it one of those things?
I think, often with our albums, I'll start by just writing a load of songs. And I guess the things that are preoccupying me become quite obvious when we have multiple songs that bring in similar topics. But this was an album that we started before the pandemic. It was initially a much bigger, more sprawling album that was more concerned with, I guess, the ideas of like maladaptive daydreaming and escapism, in the ways that we kind of step out of our daily lives inside of our heads. But it also became about, other versions of escapism and how we transport ourselves using like books and TV and video games and like VR. And I guess as time went on, that became a lot more of a preoccupation. I've completely lost track of what you actually asked me. I'm just talking now, so I'm really sorry. It sort of emerged from the songs that we'd done that it would be about those kind of topics. And they're definitely things that are fascinating to me, and I always try and write albums about. I look to people like Sufjan Stevens, who are really good at putting together a kind of a concept and sticking to it quite rigidly. Our last album was called Doom Days, and it was set over the course of 12 hours over a night out, a big kind of messy hedonistic night out during the apocalypse. And it was all about this kind of French farce of trying to shut the curtains and ignore the fact that the world is crumbling outside, while you lose yourself in the kind of nightly dramas of a friendship group and all the stupid things that can happen after midnight. But I loved having a bit of kind of structure and rigidity with that album. It was really, despite the rules, it was kind of liberating. And so we hadn't set out to make a sort of concept album per se, but it just kind of happened again. And it's this sort of narrative of, if you can plug in or put a headset on and literally be anything and do anything, like why would you necessarily want to go back to normal life if you have, if you could do whatever you want. And so that seemed like quite a good starting place for me, thematically. And so as the album progresses, there are moments of the person that you're with kind of pulling you back out of your own head and being like, oi, be here in this room, please.
Right.
And enjoy reality and enjoy this moment. But also these sort of, I guess it's a bunch of thoughts on what the future might look like if we have any power and agency to sort of have a positive impact and effect on what that could be. And we live in a time where we're constantly confronted by what the future might look like, and it's pretty bleak a lot of the time. But also there are so many people out there from activists to scientists or whatever, doing their best and using all of their time and energy trying to sort of affect things in a positive way. So it's just a strange time. We live in what often feels like the future, and that's fucking mad. So yeah, there's lots to talk about. But also, I fucking love writing pop songs, and I also wanted to make a bunch of like banging tunes that would take you out of your own head and transport you somewhere. There's a song on the album called Thelma and Louise that hopefully takes you back to like an open top car driving down a highway as Thelma and or Louise driving through the desert, wanting to escape whatever the confines of your life might be. And there's a song that takes you to 80s New York, to Club 57 and Paradise Garage, with Keith Haring and that whole art scene, which is something that I have read and watched a lot about, and looks like, for all of its complicated nuances, a very fun place to be in some ways. And if you could time travel, why wouldn't you want to have a go there? So yeah, I guess it kind of allows for a lot of fun in and around the album. And there's like Riz Ahmed pops up to deliver quite an amazing, powerful poem that he wrote in response to to the songs. So yeah, I think it's for me, the album is like trying to sort of encapsulate all of these things whilst also having a sense of like fun and escapism and joy to it as well. So yeah, it was definitely a fun project to be working on over the last few years.
Yeah, and Futurism allows so much. I mean, just like, have you ever heard of or read anything by Ray Kurzweil by chance? Do you know who this is? So he's a futurist. He's an inventor. So it's interesting. The timing is what I'm getting to here. 20 years ago, the band Our Lady Peace released a record called Spiritual Machines, and it was all based on futurism, and it was based a lot on this guy Ray Kurzweil and what he was predicting. 20 years later is now, and most of all of those predictions have come true, and they're doing a sequel. And back 20 years ago, there were lots of bands, because of the millennium, really, about thinking about the future. And here we are again, and I'm finding that it's sort of becoming like, a handful of years ago, there was a bit of a zeitgeist of artists looking towards space. And now it seems to be a little bit of the zeitgeist back to this futurism part again, for the obvious reasons. But again, I think I'm only echoing what you're saying here about that genre, about the idea of science fiction, because that's always been,
well, it's always been an amazing way to talk about the world that we live in currently. Like that's right. the one of the main devices that it employs. If you're looking to sort of Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale or 1984, or any of those classic works of science fiction, it's about making a comment on the on current society and the way that the state of the world, by taking it to a hypothetical, futuristic, nth degree. And and equally, you look at the genre of like Afrofuturism and how interesting that is in terms of looking at possible futures that could have existed. There's so much in science fiction about kind of realizing, imagining and realizing potential futures. There's a quote like, that we sort of stumbled upon and have used a lot in the sort of messaging of the album, and this fake tech company that we launched. You don't predict the future, you imagine it. It's so true. And be that a science fiction writer or be that a kind of activist trying their very hardest to sort of steer the future of life in the world into a direction that is sort of more favorable for everyone. Like it's fascinating, and there's so much there. That's why it's such a interesting and rich topic. And I think it's maybe easy, if you don't like it, to kind of dismiss it as being one note or lightweight. But actually, it's anything but. It allows you to speak to every corner of life and society and how it is, and how it could be for better or worse. It's why like utopias and dystopias exist. Anyway, I'm very much waffling on, but yeah, no, that's what, as you can see, I spent quite a lot of time reading and watching and living in ideas of all these things, because they're so interesting.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm probably not a great representative for this album, because I talk about it and it probably sounds like really turgid and heavy and like serious, and then you put the songs on and it's like the whole album's done in half an hour. I think it's fucking pretty mad tour of like my head and time travel, but yeah, it's ultimately kind of fun.
Yeah, well, and it is. You leave those Easter eggs in there. You said you're reading and watching and stuff like that. I mean, we hear about Electric Sheep, of course, in Giving the Future. I mean, just the playfulness. And again, it's a very fun record. We both said that you can take this idea and the heaviness that comes along with it, and it's scary because it's uncertain, of course, but you can also throw it on in the background and just enjoy that Club 57 moments all throughout the record too. So but you mentioned a Future Inc. in there at one point, and that's the other big part of this, because you've taken this well beyond the song. It's well beyond the stream, beyond the physical disc or whatever, because like I've only thought of a few other times where something like this is really fun for a fan, because like Nine Inch Nails, when they put out Year Zero, they would leave like these flash drives in bathrooms that would lead to telephone numbers and websites that sort of made the whole world. And that's what you're doing. You're creating a world beyond this album. Where did that and how hard was that concept to accomplish?
It's kind of something we've done for a while. When we made our second album, which was called Wild World, it was about growing up and kind of realizing, it was just 2016. It was like, huge political change in America, huge political change in the UK, and kind of as a sort of younger adult, like realizing how fucking confusing the world was. So we made this album that was kind of a response to that, and a response to sort of watching the news and feeling like you don't know where to place this confusion that you feel. And then when we made the album, we decided to sort of around it launch like a big sort of, I guess, news media conglomerate company, slightly right-leaning thing that could announce all of the music. And I guess as a way to just sort of like, I don't know, poke fun at the state of the world and the state of politics and the state of media. And that became a really helpful device for us to kind of, to build a world for the music to live in. Maybe not the most like exciting and positive album universe for us to inhabit, both on stage and off stage for 3 years, whilst also the world was going fucking mental. Like, sure, probably wasn't great for our heads, but it was kind of interesting, and it sort of showed us that you can make an album and then it can kind of grow and expand and live way beyond, through the videos and the artwork and how you message stuff online, and the tour, and our whole fucking tour on our second album was hosted by this kind of like right-wing Trumpian newsreader figure, which at the time was like, yes, we're saying something that's interesting. I think in retrospect, I think of all the poor people that went to that tour and probably didn't want to think about that stuff for a minute. And we were like, no, we're going to make you confront it even more right now. And again, on our second album, we did a similar thing, but on a much more intimate level, with this kind of house party and the apocalypse happening outside. So it's not a new thing for us to want to world build, but I think here on this album, we thought it would be really interesting to launch a sort of a big tech conglomerate that's launch a big fake tech conglomerate that had this amazing technology that we'd all use on a daily basis, that allows you to sort of, I guess, go into the universe within your brain. And it's, I guess, a sort of step on from what VR currently is. Again, it's just a way to just hold the mirror up to where things are at and poke fun at, all these like tech monoliths that we all use for better or worse in day out. It was kind of a bit of fun for us, and a way to sort of take, like I said, sort of take some of the themes of the album and some of the things that we've mentioned in some of the lyrics and kind of heighten them and make a whole alternate sci-fi reality in our videos. The video for Distorted Light Beam, which is the opening track of the album, kind of imagines a world in the future where we've all used this technology so much that we're completely neglecting the real world, much like in a lot of other sci-fi. But I think it's just a sort of, it's the bigger space outside of just the music to have more conversations in and around these topics that we think are really interesting, but also obviously just a really fun opportunity to collaborate with other creatives and directors and animators and visual artists. And the whole spirit of this album for us was about collaboration, despite having made it in the most isolated time in any of our lives. It's wound up being, musically the most collaborative album we've ever made, and both in terms of, yeah, that and the world that we sort of built around it, it's been really, really fun, you know, and challenging and difficult. You know, everyone, no matter what their job is, has faced challenges, you know, working in and around the circumstances of the last couple of years. But you know, it's I feel very lucky to have been able to make this, and also it feels quite fitting to have made this album in this time. And I you know, ironic, like, you know, a few months after we launched our futuring with its futurescape technology and its innerverse, you know, Facebook launched the metaverse, and we're like, what the fuck? We had no idea this was coming. It makes us look way more prescient than we actually are. But in the same way that people took the piss out of us for releasing an album called Doom Days on the eve of an actual apocalypse. Yeah, so I guess we just have to be careful what in deciding what to make our next album.
We're all going to be watching with that. Well, I'll wrap up with this too, because you know, you get down to plug in, and maybe AI is the messiah. I mean, the ultimate cautionary tale right here. And then the album ends with the line, "Who knows what the future holds?" Coming from that second album to what the themes were on that, to pushing you to an escapism within this record, which completely makes sense in the context we're talking about, to that line right there, "Who knows what the future holds?" The journey that you've gone on. Very easy, basic question here. Optimistic, pessimistic? Is the future the doomsday, or do you think we've got a chance?
I don't know. I think it's I think, as with everything on this album, it's, you know, it's not about there being one path or one answer, or it's not about a kind of binary solution to anything, you know, in the same way that I'm not being judgmental on our use of technology or anything like that. You know, it's all so nuanced and complicated that it's very hard to tell. It would, you know, sure, it would be nice to have some idiot in a band saying, "I'm optimistic for humanity," but you know, absolutely fuck knows. I think we all have the capacity to be absolutely amazing and also absolutely awful at the same time. But I think with that last song, with Future Holds, I guess I thought it would be funny to spend the entire album worrying about the future and then subvert it right at the end with the person you're with saying, like, "Shut the fuck up, stop stressing about the future." Like, you know, you know, it's a very obvious and important lesson for all of us to, you know, try and be a bit more present and enjoy what we have in the moment, you know. But I think for a lot of people, myself included, it's hard not to constantly think about the next thing, be that in your life or the next thing in other people's lives, or the next thing in the world, or the next thing you're working on, like whatever that might be. So I think, yeah, that last song is it's a bit of like me kicking myself in the shin and saying, like, dude, chill the fuck out. Like, just, you know, try and enjoy what you've got for a minute, because you never know when it might go away. And obviously it's important to care about and worry about the future, but it's also important to care about and worry about the now as well, I guess. Yeah. To sound like a card. Sound like I just print that on a card and sell it to no one.
Well, at least we don't end this whole interview just on the complete dystopian moment there. So, you know, even if we're crying through the grins and everything, it's still a grin. So thank you so much. Congratulations on this record. Also, I love the way these songs are represented on the Unplugged sets with MTV there. It's been really fun kind of hearing what you guys have done. But seriously, what you do is interesting every single time. So congrats, Dan, and thanks for taking the time to talk about it.
Thanks so much, Kyle. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
All right.